Joining me now to discuss what it is like on the ground in Libya today is David Swanson, journalist and author of the book, War is a Lie. Hi there, David. Thank you so much for joining me again. Now, in the run-up to the intervention in Libya, what was the case that the U.S. gave for getting involved in the conflict?
Well, of course, there was not a big question put to the U.S. public or to the Congress as there was with the missiles into Syria, and you saw the result. There should have been on Libya. This was done outside of Congress. This was done with lies about a UN resolution that didn't authorize overthrowing the government. It was done with lies about a crisis and a humanitarian need to intervene. And the idea that it was an intervention was, of course, a lie, because Western countries, including the U.S., had been arming the government of Libya right up until the point that they were arming and working with the opponents of the government of Libya. And the idea, of course, was sold as a short-term intervention that would get rid of a bad government and then things would go well. And, of course, that has not been the case. It's predictably not been the case, and it's not been the case with any such military intervention that I'm aware of through history.
So what you're saying is, do you think that we learned from Libya in order to act in Syria, or have we learned that lesson?
I think it helped a little bit in combination with Iraq and Afghanistan and the drone wars and the incredible expenditures of the past decade on weaponry and military adventures and the failing economy and the distrust and the lies and things coming out like the U.S. working with foreign governments in Yemen and possibly Pakistan and now maybe Libya on things that those governments lie to their public about and say it was just the U.S., whereas actually the local government cooperated possibly in that kidnapping. I think that the level of distrust has grown, and perhaps people have learned a little bit of a lesson from Libya.
So here we are on the 2-year anniversary of the day that Libya was reportedly freed. What does a free Libya look like today?
Well, it's worse off. This is the thing. I don't know that the oil companies and the bankers and the weapons makers think that they got a bad deal and they're worse off, but the people of Libya are worse off. And the only people who care about that fact are people who really care about humanity, which is, of course, not by any means everybody who clamors for humanitarian wars. And so the U.S. media is lying now primarily by avoiding the subject, by not talking about it. We're not hearing much about the hell that Libya has become and the violence that has overflowed its borders, and the fact that the ordinary person in Libya tends to be less secure, less well off now than before, as with Iraq. We aren't told about these predictable and consistent results of these military adventures.
Now, the phrase leading from behind was coined in response to President Obama's stance in Libya. So what does that mean? And is this kind of President Obama's foreign policy model for that region in general?
Well, we now have U.S. troops supposedly completely gone from Libya. The CIA, of course, was there before the intervention, and all the talk of no troops on the ground excluded mention of them and their use of diplomats in Benghazi as human shields and all of that disaster. And now there's talk about NATO sending people in. And this, of course, is a preference in Washington to have NATO do work rather than the United States. But the United States is the leader in NATO, is still going to be calling the shots, is still going to be involved. And when things blow up and get worse, there will be every temptation for the U.S. to, again, use the only tool it thinks to turn to, and that is violence.
So a rose by any other name is still the U.S. military, essentially. But how is this unrest in Libya affecting the neighboring countries in the region?
Well, you've seen violence overflow into Mali. You've seen arms shipped out to Syria and fighters shipped out to Syria. And you've seen a lack of stability in Libya impacting all of the nations around it. And you compare that with Tunisia, which is not violence-free and not perfect by any means, but engaged in largely nonviolent protests. This is the difference between a country that overthrows a government largely non-violently, albeit inspired by a suicide, compared to where massive violence is used. You can't switch it off like a light switch. You can't switch the resentment off, and it's going to be there for years.
And it is very important on this 2-year anniversary to really look at Libya as a country right now and also look at U.S. involvement in it to kind of understand what our impact is when we go and enter these countries, whether we put soldiers on the ground or not. David Swanson, journalist and author of War is a Lie, thank you so much.
Thank you.